A warm good evening to one and all. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. So goes the quote
Good
by
evening
Mark
to one and all.
Twain.
The two most important days in your life.
There is nothing more important than finding purpose and identity for an adolescent. With proud privilege, I, Nithala Mariam Roy, student counselor, welcome you all to today's Effective Parenting webinar on adolescence. To enlighten and inspire us to guide adolescents in reaching their fullest potential, we have with us Miss Aarti C. Rajaratnam, a renowned psychologist. Let us begin this eventful day with a prayer song. We will now have our beloved principal, stalwart, and leader, Mr. P. Prabhakaran, to deliver the welcome address.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. The respected chief guest of this today's function, Miss Aarti C. Rajaratnam, my colleagues, the students, parents, good evening, everybody. I take great pride and pleasure in inviting Miss Aarti C. Rajaratnam, a well-defined psychologist with 2 decades of experience in the field of childhood, adolescent, and adult mental health and well-being. She provides evidence-based theories, therapies in guidance and counseling for various psychological and educational issues. She has, to her credit, several prestigious talks such as 2 TEDx events bringing out innovative education to enhance each child's unique learning style. The concerns on well-being and parenting are regularly addressed by her in various national and international forums, such as the Hindu and Parent World magazine. She has published one of the best-seller listed books such as The Parenting Innocence to Inner Sense. During this time of crisis, she has delivered several far-reaching webinars on lockdown wellness, a regular segment on Pudu Yugam channel Morning Cave called Chinnanjiru Ulagam on parenting, on Adolescent series Knowing Your Teenagers on YouTube, and more. Ms. Aarti C. Rajaratnam driven and well implemented modules, interventions, and international projects have earned her manifold recognition and awards. Apart from this, if you look at her short profile, it goes pages together. In short, I can say she has presented special paper at 11 state level, 7 national level, and 5 international level conferences, and has completed projects and delivered lectures on her innovative curriculum models and psychology in Spain, United States of America, Nepal, Dubai, Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, and Sri Lanka, but believes India is where the true transformation and services are needed. Once again, on behalf of myself and my team members and school management committee members, I take great pride and privilege to welcome Aarti C. Rajanathanam to our webinar section. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Our moderator for the session will be Mrs. Tanya S. She will share with us the concerns that have been raised by our dear parents in the Q&A session that follows. We look forward to a fruitful session. May I now invite Miss Aarti C. Rajaratnam to take over. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Nithila. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And firstly, I would like to thank the principal and the entire team for coordinating this event. Many people behind the scenes have been instrumental in putting this together. So thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity to share with the parents. And of course, for all the parents who've joined us, I hope we have a wonderful interactive session. Thank you for sending in questions, which we will address towards the end. So what I thought would be the best way to work through something is not to give you theory, because information you will find online and you don't need somebody else telling you what information is already available online. On the other hand, what I'd like to do with you today is to share some of the most common concerns that come to me in counseling and when people interact with me online, and work with you in explaining what's happening inside the teenager's mind or inside their brain, inside their body, and from the mild to the severe, how it can manifest what you and I can do as parents or as teachers. So I hope that's fine. I have the most common conditions or common complaints from parents, starting with the first one. And the moment I say it, most mothers will say, oh yes, I think my daughter or my son has it. The first one is lethargy. And when I say lethargy, you have like this teenager who's all the time not combing their hair, just walking around from one place to the other. You ask them to bring this, they'll slowly bring it and keep it on the table. And then you get so irritated. You're like, in your age, I used to be able to do all these things. And then your teenager just gives you one look and say, I'm not you. And then you get even more irritated. So this is the first and the most common complaint that many parents have. But it is something that we need to understand very scientifically. It's not something that your teenager is deliberately doing. So what happens when a child or a teenager is lethargic? The first and the mildest area in which I can talk about this is the hormonal changes that our teenagers are going through. And when I say hormonal changes, for boys, there is going to be testosterone in their body. It's required for their growth. And for girls, there is a combination of progesterone and estrogen, progesterone being there more often than estrogen. And when progesterone is there, you're going to find your girl very irritable, shouting at you for nothing. Suddenly you speak to her and she's like, Amma, don't do that. So that those irritation that comes up with these hormones. And what it also does is, so if you imagine that there's a brain, if there is an imbalance of progesterone or testosterone, it's going to cause this, very dull mood. It's not going to keep them driven. It's not going to make them work. This is at the very mild level. The second step is the lifestyle. Now, if you notice, you are in Oman. since our school is in Oman, I'm going to address it from there. Most of you may not really have an opportunity to go out and have physical activity or physical exercise as much as we could do in India. Even in the COVID situation, we've also had these problems. But where I would like to bring in lifestyle is many of our children during this lockdown per se have started going into binge watching of Netflix, or staying up playing all sorts of games till very late in the night, not sleeping sufficiently. So what happens is the brain, apart from these hormonal changes, is going through having to deal with irregular sleep habits, poor eating habits, and also very, very faulty exercise schedules. Now, this can also contribute towards this lethargy. And I can give you an example. Imagine that you did not have 3 nights of proper sleep, right? On the 4th day, you are going to feel very, very dull and very lethargic. And if you continued this for a period of a month or probably even 2-3 weeks, you will notice that you don't have the same energy levels that you have now. I'm someone who has very great energy levels because I maintain a good lifestyle. I do sleep well, I exercise every day, and I also make sure that I have a balanced diet. And these would be the 3 key takeaways for any teenager who is lethargic, or what we call lazy sometimes. And I don't like to use the word lazy because it's a myth. It's a misunderstanding of how the brain functions. Now, the third and the more serious way in which I would look at lethargy is inability to regulate emotions. Now, for a teenager, the brain goes through many changes. And if you notice, the thinking part of the brain is not as well developed as the emotional part of the brain. I'm not going to use the technical words. You could go online, you can see the words. But technically, the emotional part tends to jump in faster. And so for a teenager, risk equals reward. And they also tend to feel emotions much stronger than the others. And they're not able to take it to their thinking system as fast. And so it becomes a problem. So if I have to give you an example, now, if I was working with a teenager and I made fun of the teenager, called them a nickname, they won't forgive me so easily. The adult will keep it in their mind, but won't show it outside. They'll learn how to smile externally and all that. But with the teenager, that's not the same. They'll hold on to this, and every time they see me, they have that same extreme level of emotion they're unable to regulate. And so imagine each emotion that we feel has a different set of chemicals. They control the brain differently. And also the teenager is unable to take this emotional overdrive or sudden surge and take it to the thinking part and be able to regulate it or calm it down. Now, this over a period of time, especially when they're under a lot of stress, can show up as lethargy, in which case counseling would help for a lot of these children. And the fourth, which I would take in the serious level, like I said, from mild to severe, the fourth is when there is a very, very severe addiction. It can be a substance-related addiction, or it can even be addiction to a very violent video game. I don't want to name them, you know the names, but I'm just saying any violent video game, especially the ones that are banned now in India, will not be very, very healthy for our children. And we keep reading about the negative effects of video games and things like that. So these would be the 4 common reasons why a teenager would come up as lethargic. What can I do as a parent to be able to work through this? If it's in the milder levels, I would suggest girls require about 250 minutes of physical activity per week to be able to regulate their emotions and to be able to regulate the hormones in the brain. Boys require about 300 to 350 minutes. And we'll need to bring this in as many forms of exercise. If your student is interested in sport and you have space around the house where you can indulge in sport, that would be the best. If not, even some indoor work, stretches and things like that. But that physical work helps in bringing what we call endorphins and other positive chemicals in the brain that helps them to maintain or regulate emotion and sort of move away from this lethargy that keeps them in a very, very low mood. If it is addiction or if it is a poor emotional regulation, some kind of therapy or supportive help will help your child. Now, going to the second problem. Now, many parents are already sort of wondering, is it this, is it this, is it this? I'd like you to just note this down and then try and work. So in the end, I'll talk about how we can understand if this is the problem and how we can go about the solutions, because I don't want to give you the problems. You already know them. We'll work with solutions, and that's our primary goal. The second and the most common one, refusing to come for any family functions, refusing to meet guests who come home. So you have this teenager, the moment somebody rings the bell, they run into their room and they don't want to interact with them. You tell them, come, we have to go for this wedding, we have to go for this housewarming, especially when we have this Indian cultural setting, we need to go for these functions, and especially if you're in a country outside, you may have a lot of events. especially for Onam, for example, you may have had some kind of function where you have to meet and things like that. And your teenager says, I'm not coming. They'll give you all sorts of excuses. I'm having headache. I want to sleep. I want to study. They would not have studied on other days, but on the day that they have to go for the function, they'll give you this excuse that I have to study. I know many of you are smiling now because you probably face this every day. What is the reason for this? Now, this is a very important area. It's a very typical brain change or a change that happens for the teenager, which is what we call the imaginary audience. Every teenager, because they're growing and their brain is moving from the childhood space into the adult space, they're neither adults nor children. They don't fit into either side. So what happens is abstract intelligence is opening up. The brain is going through a lot of changes. Emotional part is high, like I told you, all of these things. So in the midst of all this, they're also searching for identity. So in all of this, they go through what is called the imaginary audience, which means every teenager believes between 50 and 500 people are always watching them. So, even if water is stagnated, they'll be combing their hair, standing in front of the mirror, combing their hair, because they feel that everybody is watching them. And, even as a teacher, if you called your child separately and reprimanded them, they'll say, in front of everybody, she insulted me. And it's not that there was anybody else. In their own mind, they feel that everybody is watching them. This is one of the reasons you will feel, you will see teenagers doing very awkward things, like standing in front of like a train and taking a selfie and things like that, because they think everybody is watching me. They don't realize that no one is actually watching them. But this imaginary audience is their way of dealing with the reality of all these overwhelming emotions. So it's very important not to force them. If you can, as a parent, some events take them, some events, if they're not very comfortable, keep them at home, because it's a very, very stressful experience for them. This is at the mildest level. The second one that I would ask you to look for is also that they're looking for identity. So they, till now, they were known as your son or your daughter. They like take a lot of pride from family and all that. Now suddenly they don't want to be known as your son or daughter, because they're developing their own identity. They want to be known by their name. They want to be known by their gang. They want to be known by their achievements and things like that. That is also one of the reasons they avoid these large crowds, because when they come to the large crowd, they have to use their old identity of being part of the family. And this is something quite normal. Allow them some amount of space in this. It's very important that we respect this, because it's part of their normal development. When we were growing up in India, we didn't have these options. But today, if we understand our teenagers, it helps us to build a bond with them that they may not have otherwise. The third and the most serious issue is body image related problems. Now, if you look at media, you look at any advertisement, they show you this lean person or this person with the six pack and muscles and everything. So we have these very, very photoshopped, perfect body types that our children are supposed to look like. So we tell them, if you are not skinny enough, you're not fat enough, thin enough, dark enough, fair enough, all of these words that are associated with the body, they start feeling that they're not good enough. Somewhere it's a very unfortunate thing that our children are being put through, but it is real, and we do live in a world where these kind of things are repeatedly reinforced. So many children who have body image related problems could also be avoiding coming to functions and all of that, because they feel very awkward in their body. They feel, maybe I'm too fat, they'll make fun of me. And even if somebody says, makes fun of someone else, they think they were making fun of them. So because of the imaginary audience, this body image problems also become very severe. What I can do as a parent, and it's very, very important, is not to make fun of my child's appearance at any point. Having nicknames which represent their skin color, or nicknames that represent that they're too fat or thin and things like that. If you've given them those names as young children, please don't continue to use them in adolescent years, because it becomes more difficult for the child to regulate this. Already I told you they have difficulty with regulation of emotion. The last and the more severe reason why they avoid groups is if there has been some kind of abuse, some kind of bullying, or also some kind of cyber shaming, things like this, because they feel that, whoever is shaming me in the cyberspace could be in the function, could be somebody who's there. If that is the case, please take it very seriously. And if you need to involve legal help or help of agencies that may be able to help you, it may be very, very important. But on a scale of 1 to 10, if you ask me, if you can try and take your child out few times and let them have their space on other times, it usually settles down, and they will also be able to understand, these are important functions for my parents, I must go. These are functions that they will not force me, and the child has a little bit of freedom in this. This would be the second problem. Now, going to the third problem, and you will probably as parents be wondering why I'm taking the side of the teenagers. Please remember, we already have a typical brain. Our brain has gone through many experiences. We've already developed a lot. But for a growing brain, these are very stressful experiences. And if we can be supportive, it'll be very helpful. So I'm not biased towards teenagers, but I would rather help us understand our teenagers so that our relationship is built better. Because ultimately, as parents, what we're looking for is a healthy relationship with our teenagers. And these would be steps that can be taken in the long run. The third problem that parents complain about, he always listens to his friends. She's always dressed like her friends, like they all have like, similar dress that they want to wear for a function, for, for Onam, for something like this. Or, they're also, they have like these like words that they use. They have code words for teachers, all of these things. And this is one of the most normal things that a teenager should go through. If they're not going through it, they're not probably having a normal adolescence. And this is because, like I told you in the beginning, they're searching for identity. So they will move away naturally from family towards friends. It doesn't mean that they don't like their family, but they're exploring a new identity. Till now, I belong to the family. Now I would like to have a new space which I consider my own. So in this, what will happen? This age, they need to have gangs, they need to be in groups, and they will have what is called cliques, small groups, and they will not allow anybody else to come into the clique. So if somebody else comes from another clique into their clique, they will be considered a spy. And these are very normal, real things. So if a teenager comes and tells you, Amma, nobody is taking me in the group, I have no friends, please don't make the mistake of saying, I am there, I am your friend. No, at this age, they need the peer group to be able to develop normally. So what you need to sit down and do with them is find out why they're struggling with making friends. And I can give you an example. In one of the schools here in India, this child's parents had a transferable job. Every 2 years, they would go into another city. So this teenager was having a lot of problem making friends. And the mother did not understand that she should allow her daughter to go and make friends instead of coming and telling the teacher, ma'am, please tell the other children to be friends with my child. Because what happened after that was the other children started teasing her even more because she had poor social skills. At this age, by the time they're 12, 13 years, they should be able to slowly start coming out of their comfort zone, not relying on you and making their own friends. Because otherwise, if we interfere in this phase, they will have less opportunity making friends. And when they do say that they're feeling very low, that friends rejected them, friends pushed them out of the group, it's very real. Please do help them because it's a very real issue for them. Because in this age, see, at different age groups, different people have extreme fears. So for a 40-year-old person, the worst fear will be losing their job. For a 2-year-old, 3-year-old child, the worst fear will be being separated from the parents. But for a teenager, the worst fear will be rejection by the peer group. So please understand that it's a very real fear for them. But another thing that you need to understand, apart from the gang age, one of the reasons that children may be having to be with the group, the severe condition, would be because there is a lot of peer pressure. They feel that, I have to be in the group, otherwise I will not be respected, I will not be loved, and so on. And the worst condition would be low self-worth and low self-esteem, in which case we need to support them through therapeutic help, and that may require some changes in the family as well. So please understand that most of it is normal, but if you still feel that your child has very severe difficulties, then one of the things that you may need to do is to work along with the counselor and to support them. And you may notice that in the severe conditions, I'm always asking you to meet a professional, because sometimes what happens is we may not be able to see the problem as it is, because we're very close to our child. We want the best for our child. When we are also so emotional, sometimes the solutions may elude us. So it may be important for us to meet an objective therapist who may be able to say, no, maybe these are the areas that all of you need change. And that's why I'm suggesting that in the more severe conditions, it would be good for us to work along with a professional. Not everything needs medicines. Many things require an objective perspective and coping strategies that can be supported over a period of time. Now, going to the fourth problem, which many mothers have told me about their daughters especially, but it's true of boys as well. They've become very secretive. Ma'am, till she was in 6th standard or 5th standard, she used to tell me everything that happened in school, would share everything about her friends. But now she says, what happened in school? Nothing. Tell me what happened. What did your friends say? Ma, this is something that you shouldn't do. Don't touch my phone. Now they're creating their own space. Now, remember, this is a very important phase. And if your child is going through it, it's a very beautiful phase as well. Because what is happening in this phase is that your child is learning healthy communication patterns. See, young children, when you take a 7-year-old, 8-year-old child, when they go outside, somebody asks them, did your mother fight today? They'll say, yeah, today my mother and father fought in the house. They don't know that some information should be said or kept inside the house and some information can be shared outside. Because young children, they just live literally. But by the time they come into adolescence, they realize that this is information that can be shared. This is information that should be secretive. This is information that should be said or can be shared with these people, but not with these people. So they're making those communication patterns. Now, even we know, like in a helping field, all of my work is confidential. Though I may be sharing examples, I didn't tell you it is about this person. I'm giving you a general way in which confidentiality is maintained. So these communication patterns are what our children are exploring by being secretive. The second reason why children could be secretive is because they're learning to set healthy boundaries. What is happening is they share. So a friend comes and shares some information with your daughter or with your son, and the friend says, this is a secret, please don't tell anybody, even my mother and father don't know. Now this is said, and the friend is, now I am exploring, as a teenager, I'm exploring what loyalty means. I am learning what it is to be a good friend. I am learning that boundaries need to be set with my parents and her parents or his parents, and I need to be loyal to my friends. So these healthy boundaries are what are being set at this point, and we must be able to respect this because this is how they learn long-term human relationships. However, when we come to the negatives of this, what could be a reason? As an adult, I have let down my child on many occasions. I promised my child something, but I did not do it. I said I will not share this with somebody, but I went and shared something. So the child has dealt with poor trust. They're not able to trust you anymore and therefore can become very secretive. If that's the case, you will also notice that they're very silent at home, do not open up at all. In the first two conditions, they may share few things, but if they have already lost trust in you, then you will notice that the sharing has limited itself very, very deeply, and they may not be able to share any information. They will, in fact, try and give you a lot of opposite information or lies so that you don't ask them any information. The last is when there is abuse. If there is some form of abuse, especially sexual abuse, that the child is being exposed to, or some kind of cyber violence or cyberbullying, then the child could become secretive. And I'll come in the end to how do you understand, is this a mild problem, is this a serious problem? But I hope this answers your questions on this area. Now, the next area that I'm going to work on is very common. They always focus on dressing up. Ma'am, before we ask him to go to school or ask them to leave for a function, they spend 1 hour, 1.5 hours combing their hair, change their dress some 15 times and all of this. Remember right in the beginning, I told you there is something called the imaginary audience and body image. This is the reason that they go through this phase, and they feel that everybody is watching them, and so it becomes a very, very real issue for them. At the minor level, this is what it is. The second one is also what we call the personal fable. In the teenager's mind, they are the hero or the heroine of everybody's story. They don't realize that they have their own story, and only in their story they're a hero or heroine. They believe that there is hero, heroine in everybody's story, and everybody's thinking only of them. When they have the personal fable, naturally they have to be dressed perfectly, right? So this is also one of the reasons, and this is the Instagram generation. Everything is about, that perfect photograph that can go onto social media. Of course, the generation has moved on to Snapchat and other apps as well, but I'm just trying to tell you that they need to give that picture perfect look, and that is one of the reasons. Allow these as long as it's not very obsessive, because some of these things are extremely normal parts of their identity development. However, when you need to look at the negatives, the two serious problems, one is body shaming and body image problems. Find out if the child is being made fun of. Sometimes there can be children in the classroom who may be making fun of their appearance and things like that, because of which our child wears extra clothing, wears clothing that is very loose, so that nobody is able to make fun of them and things like that. And the last reason, and the most severe one, when children have a problem with dressing or spend a lot of time dressing or overdressing, could be because of sexual abuse, because they want to seem unattractive to the abuser. Of course, I'm not saying that all children will have it, but I need you to know that from mild to severe, there can be a lot of these reasons. Now, the next area that I'd go to is one of the most common, and this is the last but one that I'm going to deal with: rebellion. The teenager was always listening to me he was a very sweet, well-behaved child till he was 10 years old, ma'am. Suddenly now, for everything, he and I have a fight. I'm pushing so much and he's pushing back. This power struggle is happening all the time in our house. Or my child doesn't want to speak to me anymore, speaks to me only through my husband or my wife. They're speaking through somebody else. And everything, is monosyllabic. Did you eat? Mm. Did you not eat? Mm. This kind of thing. So all of this kind of a communication breakdown happening in rebellion happening, what is really the reason? You need to understand this is part of their normal development, normal hormonal changes, identity changes at a very mild level. But also, since they're searching for identity, they don't need to always be controlled by somebody else. They do not like that sense of control. As a result, what will happen? Many of our teenagers will start arguing with us, fighting with us, things like this. Now, one of the things that we need to do at this point in time as adults is to calm down, because this should not become a shouting match. The child is already having difficulty with regulating their emotion. This is not the time to say, we used to listen to our parents, we have always done this. If our parents told us this, this is what we followed, things like that. This is not the time to do that, because it becomes very dangerous when you fight fire with fire. Fire is always fought with water. If you notice, we need to be that calming presence, otherwise rebellion becomes higher. Now, the second reason why this could be a problem, rebellion happens, is even we don't know how to deal with our emotions. Many of us know that shouting. So my father, for example, used to be a very short-tempered person. He used to use a lot of anger to get his way. So when we grew up, we also started using anger as the normal way to deal with things. Only later we realized that anger need not be the best way. There are many other ways in which you can deal with a situation. Many times assertiveness helps, communication helps, but we model our parents blindly. So it could be that we are also, as parents, modeling that might is right. If I use force, if I use anger, if I use power, I will get my way. So the child also starts realizing that, Appa or Amma are doing this, so I can also do the same thing. So if I'm modeling this, this would be a good time to change that and start becoming assertive. The next reason why this could be a problem, and the more severe reason, is because of stress. If children are going through chronic stress or acute stress, they could have problem with rebellion, because they're so uncomfortable with their own emotions. They're so anxious within them. They're not. So for example, the COVID situation, they're hearing about so many people be dying, so many countries being affected. It could cause a lot of anxiety for a lot of children. So if they're not able to deal with their fear and their anxiety, that could also come out as rebellion. And we may be using force, where actually what we may need to give them is a lot of supportive help to be able to regulate their emotions. The next area that I have two more areas. The next area that I would like to work with is always hungry, craving for junk food or sweets. And this is part of the hormonal fluctuation. For girls, the craving will be chocolate and sweets. For boys, it will be oily, spicy, fried food. So all your chickens and all your junk, as we call it, the fast food culture that comes in, actually beautifully feeds into this hormonal craving. But unfortunately, it's very, very unhealthy as well, because it's not something that can be broken down by the body, because they're all deeply processed foods. And anything that's processed is not easy for the body to break down. And that becomes, in addition to the poor lifestyle, etc., becomes something that contributes towards obesity. And then obesity becomes body image problems. And then body image problems becomes low self-esteem. So it becomes a very vicious cycle. So what I would suggest as a therapist is, one, have a balanced diet, because one thing that you need to remember, especially in the Indian diet, it's already a very balanced diet. No matter which meal you're eating, divide your plate into 3 portions. One portion must be a carbohydrate, one portion must be a vitamin, and one portion must be a protein. If all 3 are equal, usually what happens is there are good enzymes that balance out the digestion process, and the child finds it easy to digest the food. However, if they have only protein, like they're having a whole bucket of chicken, okay, or if they're having only vitamins, suddenly, they say, I'm going to have this diet, I'm going to eat only vegetables. That's also dangerous. And if they're going to have only carbohydrate, full plate of biryani, now this is going to become very, very difficult, because the body cannot break that down. And the moment I eat one food group without working on the other food groups, I'm going to naturally create problems. So this is where, as an adult, I need to bring in the balance. And the best way to bring it is also for me to make sure that I also maintain those food habits. Many times we notice the parent will be eating unhealthy also, So the child says, they're also eating, so why should I eat healthy? So a lot of changes need to happen even from our side. Yes, it's nice to eat tasty food, no doubt, but when it's modeling, be careful because they're watching us. And it's important for us to be able to bring about these changes. We can't remain children all our lives. We will need to become parents at some point and lead the process of modeling. The next and the last area that I wanted to share, the most common problem, is they walk away when I'm talking to them. Ma'am, I'm trying to give him serious advice about what career to choose or what course to study, and he's just walking away and he closes the door behind him. Or I'm just telling my daughter that, she should not be wearing these kind of clothes, and she's just walking away when I'm speaking to her. And this is one of the most common problems that many parents have. And please understand, there are many, many reasons for this. The first is that teenagers have what is called hypocritical thought. They will have one set of rules for themselves and one set of rules for you. If they follow the rules, they know no problem. If they break the rules, they change the rules. If you break the rules, you become a bad person. So they'll have this hypocrisy as part of their identity development. But it's not abnormal, it's quite normal. And during that hypocritical thought, when you give a lot of advice, they will move away, because advice is very easy to give. It's very difficult to follow for anybody in any age group. So we'll need to understand, we'll have to ditch the lecture, not use the advice, not use the lecture, but need to see what our child is trying to communicate. On the more severe levels, one is an overwhelm of emotions. When you're giving me information, see, I am now 16 or 17 years old. Okay, I could be 14 years old when you're giving me this advice, and you're asking me for the rest of your life, what do you want to do? It's one of the most overwhelming decisions. At 14, 15, 16, my brain is not yet fully developed to understand what I want to do when I'm 35 or 40. Right? So many things are interesting for me. Suddenly I want to do this. Suddenly I want to do that. My brain is so excited about these things. My brain is emotionally driven. So risk equals reward. And at that time, you're asking me to decide whether I'm going to join the IIT, whether I'm going to do an entrance coaching. It's very overwhelming for me. So when my emotions are very overwhelming, I experience a lot of anxiety. And in a way to reduce my anxiety, I walk away because you are causing anxiety for me. And the easiest way to deal with this anxiety is to walk away. So don't treat it as disrespect. It could be an emotional overwhelm. Let them calm down and then you can have a discussion with them. And I'll talk about how we can do that. The next reason could be that our relationship is not built on bonding. So this is where I'd like to move to two very simple rules. When we were raised in India, our parents most often used control to correct us. So the teenager was always corrected. Don't do this. This is not good for you. Okay? They used control to correct us. And in fact, strict punishments were also given. If you remember in school, at home, strict punishments were given. That same method does not work now. It does not work for our children because they're already born in a world which has so much of violence. At this point, our rule or our role as parents needs to be being able to communicate, to connect with our children. Because when I'm able to communicate, to connect with my child, it becomes a very, very natural way to help my child. So this is where I'm going to talk about what is called a connection ritual. All of these problems I talked about work with your child. But before we do that, you need to realize if I've not built a connection with my child, they're not going to say, Amma, you attended this webinar today. From tomorrow, I'm going to listen to you. It's not going to happen that way. I need to always have a bridge of communication to be able to speak. Now, if I'm able to connect to you, I'm using an app through which I'm able to connect to you. Similarly, in a relationship, that bridge is required. And for that, we set what is called a connection ritual. A connection ritual is something that you do every day. Set 15 minutes to 20 minutes every day with your child, doing something that both of you enjoy. It could be playing a game, it could be going for a walk, it could be playing Antakshari, it can be anything where you are not critical, they are not critical. It's a time where you spend as though your child is the most precious person in your life. And they spend time with you as though you're the most precious. It takes time to build. Usually between 3 weeks and 3 months is how much time I give you to build this bond. And at that point, when you're able to enjoy, you can let them know about yourself. You can let them share. When you build this connection ritual, it serves as a platform upon which you can start other forms of communication. How do you set this communication? So there are very simple rules that you will follow. Please note it down if you would like, because it's very important. First, if you would like to speak to your child, don't suddenly call them and say, come, I need to sit down and speak to you. Now you do this, it makes them very anxious because they think something wrong has been done. Even if they've not done anything wrong, if I told you, come, I need to talk to you, and I have a very stern face, you're going to get very, very thrown off by the whole thing. So the first thing that you do is you say, Kana, I need to speak to you about XYZ, whatever the issue that you want to speak about. I'd like to speak to you about this. Let's speak tomorrow at 6 o'clock, or let's speak tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Fix a time and let him or her also prepare their side of the discussion. So if you want to discuss about PUBG not being good for them, let them also have their arguments. You must also prepare well enough your arguments, both pro and con, because this has to be a healthy discussion. And this is a beautiful way also to model how long-term relationships need to be. Because as a parent, if I let my child know that communication is the key to healthy relationships, my children will also start understanding that when I have a problem, I can communicate back with my parents. So the first is you let them know well in advance that you want to discuss, let them also prepare. Second, most important part in this, keep your promise. So if you decide that you're going to speak about this at 6 o'clock, please make sure that that 6 o'clock, your child is priority. Switch off your phone, switch off your gadgets, sit with your child, make your child a priority and sit down. Because when any relationship matters, we make time for it. And just because it's your child, don't take them for granted. Because you set the model of taking them for granted, they will also do the same for you because we're setting the model. Third is make sure that they've eaten well, rested well, because if they're cranky because they're hungry, they've not slept and all that, it'll lead to an argument before you start the discussion. So please make sure that physiologically they are comfortable. The fourth is make sure that you remain balanced. Okay. Any argument, any discussion that you have will have small points where you disagree. If you do not maintain the balance, it'll go out of hand because the teenager's brain is already emotional, right? So many times your teenager may do things that may irritate you. And you can say, see, what you're doing is making me a little angry. So if you feel you don't want to discuss it immediately, let me finish my side of the discussion. Be very calm, stay very balanced, and let them hear you out. Don't advise, don't give gyan, don't moralize, don't lecture, don't make them feel small. Treat them as an equal, because the moment you do that, they realize, see, in spite of me misbehaving or not communicating, my father or my mother stayed balanced and respected me. Over a period, it helps to build the bond and build the trust. Next, most important, if you're working with a boy, please walk as you talk, because boys are spatial processors. So if you sit down and talk, they will drum their hands on the table, move their legs. I know many of you are smiling because teenage boys do need to move to process information. So walk along with them very gently and have a chat. If you're working with a girl, make her sit beside you. Don't face her and do eye-to-eye contact. It becomes very difficult for them because they get an emotional overwhelm. Sit beside them and speak like you would speak with a friend, because these two rules are very, very precious and they're very important even in the counseling space. Very often we are told to look at them. I always make teenagers sit beside me, because then what happens, it leads to a very healthy discussion because they don't feel that the imaginary audience is there. They just feel like a supportive friend is listening and talking to them. The next most important, use examples from their generation. Please don't say, when I was 14 years old, this is what I did. You lived at a different time. They live at a different time. So please prepare well enough to find examples from their own generation. Most important, don't lecture, don't advise. Stick to facts. Give short facts, listen to their facts, have a healthy discussion. If you feel that the facts are not sufficient, schedule another meeting so that you can have a better discussion, because this process is valuable. And the most important, never stop with one discussion. Follow it up within a week with one more discussion. Do this over a period of 2 or 3 times, and you will realize that the relationship with the teenager is easier to build. With this, I'll hand it over to my friend Danya, because she's going to help us with the interaction part of it, because I know that many of you have sent lovely questions for me to answer. So I'm going to take the questions now.
Thank you, ma'am. It was really an interesting, and thank you for equipping and inspiring the parents with your expertise. Now, moving on to the parents' queries for the speaker, we have received many queries, ma'am. Many queries means many queries from our parents. Like some of their concerns were common. So we have just consolidated and selected the most commonly asked queries. So shall we move on to the first question, ma'am?
Of course.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, now this present situation, like since outdoor games are not possible due to this pandemic, my child always plays with his tab and it is being used for multiple purpose. How do I regulate it and motivate them to be physically active? Like,
Now, this is a question across the world because all of us are restricted indoors. Of course, physical activity is very important for a teenager. And so anything that you're able to do, even if it is indoor, if it is stretches, if it's a terrace and you can play shuttle, you can go for a walk around the block, any kind of activity is fine. But what is the bigger question in what you've asked me is this addiction to the tab, addiction to any form of gadget. So it's not just the tab, there are n number of gadgets. Now, we'll need to understand that many children could be using gadgets as a way of escaping, dealing with the emotional fallout of COVID-19. If that is happening, then it's very important to sit down and chat with your child. But I need to also mention something very important. See, now when you buy a mixie or you buy a blender or you buy a TV or you buy a phone, it comes with a set of instructions of what can and cannot be done. So for example, it says in a mixie or blender, you can't use hot food. It'll explode, right? In an oven, you cannot use a certain kind of cutlery or certain kind of vessel because it is not good for that. Unfortunately, when the tab came, when these screens came, when these video games came, it did not come with an instruction of so many minutes per day is what is important or sufficient or dangerous more than this. In fact, if you see countries like France have actually banned children below the age of 5 from using gadgets, and schools have been asked not to use gadgets because we find that it has a lot of psychological impact and a lot of neurological fallout as well. So one of the things, set the connection ritual. Set the connection ritual first before you set anything else, because without a connection and without a relationship, trying to change a behavior is very dangerous, very difficult also. So first, set the connection ritual. Once you've done that, sit down and set an optimal usage for both of you. What you are using, what your child is using, both need to be regulated. If you notice, many mothers are also sitting and watching videos all day. The child is saying, you're watching videos, I can also be doing the same thing. So the regulation has to happen on both sides, because unless we lead the change, we may not be able to have a long lasting change. Just trying to control the child's usage may not work. And more important, if the child is using this for emotional regulation, find out what is making them anxious. Are they anxious about the illness and things like that? And if the child is anxious, help them focus on the here and now. What is most important is to help them understand that I can still control hygiene. I can still control social distancing. I can still control use of mask. Right? So where I can exert control, I can. And I use my intelligence in that way. I hope that answers your question.
yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Now, passing on to the next question. Children need to get the knowledge of what they should do and they shouldn't do at this particular age of their teenage. So they are concerned, like, how do they make them this realization? Means they are very much concerned about, like, children are having some intimate relationships, or how do they make them realize it, make to bring them the realization?
It's a very deep question because it has several facets. Now, it's not only at this age that the child understands what can and cannot be done. All through life, we model the behavior that the child should have. So when a young child is, speaking, I model for the child what words are allowed and what words are not allowed. So all through, the child is looking at significant adults around them and they're learning. And this can even be movies, media, and all of that. So if you notice, if the movie has a bad influence, the child is using that. Right? So children have influences from many areas, and one of the major influences will be the parent. Now, when you come to intimate relationships, like I said, they will be moving from family towards the peer group. Now, if the question is specifically to do with intimate relationships, I would say at this age, there will be natural infatuation. Okay. And that is very hormonal and it's a very developmental change. We have to look at it from the lens of science and not from the lens of morality, of this is right, this is wrong. Scientifically, my body is saying your reproductive system, see earlier your circulatory system, your musculoskeletal system, your bones, everything was growing. You had no problem with all this growth. Your hair was growing, your nails were growing, you had no problem. Suddenly my reproductive system is growing and you have a problem with it. What I need to do is to have a healthy discussion with my child about their body and sexuality without shying away from it. If I am not able to do it, I need to also look online for resources. In today's day and age, there are beautiful videos that are educational enough for children to understand. So more than modeling, when it comes to relationships, having a healthy discussion with my child, letting them know that infatuation will happen. But when infatuation happens, it's usually a hormonal change and usually a chemical change in my brain. And within a few days, I may lose interest in the person and not to take it very seriously. Where we go and make a big mistake is to go and tell the child, this is not good for you, etc., etc., etc. So then the child starts hiding this information from you. I would rather have my child speak to me directly and discuss any challenges they may have than go and hide this information and get stuck into problems. So I would rather be the go-to person. And I hope that answers the question of the parent. And if they're interested, ma'am, online, when sir introduced, I said there is a Knowing Teenagers segment on YouTube that's available where I've spoken about how to talk to teenagers about relationships and sexuality. Parents can have a look at that video. It's an entire 12 minutes where I've dealt with the problem.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Now, the next question is, ma'am, already you have put light on this. How to pacify an adolescent when they are angry or worried? Would you like to say something more about
See, like
this,
I said,
ma'am?
emotions are already under difficulty because they find a lot of regulation related problems. The first thing is, if the child is already agitated, stop talking, because words add fuel to the fire. Saying things like, calm down, don't do this, in your age I didn't do this. Very often when somebody is already emotionally agitated, the best thing you and I can do is to calm down, keep quiet.
Okay.
If you can use pat them on the back, hold their hand, see what works for the child. Once they've calmed down, you can say, when you are ready to talk about it, I'm available here. Let the child decide when they want to talk about it. Some children may want to talk about it, some may not want to talk about it. Just allow that. Because when we want to pacify, it's not like a young baby who's crying and I'm going to pat them and they're going to become all right. By now, they're aware of what is triggering them, what ways to regulate it. If they need your help, be available. If they don't need your help, let them handle it. So, this is a good way to also give them the autonomy to make their own choices, and that would help.
Okay. Next question, ma'am. Most recently found, like, now, how to nurture genuine interest in a child in academics in this current era of less educated but highly successful YouTubers who might be their role models. When a child analysis YouTubers are more successful, that means they are making more money than their struggling professional parents, they form an opinion and literally question the relevance of circular curricular content in their life. So being a teacher myself, I know that ISM teachers are doing their great job. It's not about teachers or school, but about our educational system and the changing world. So they are getting more interested on these YouTubers who are making more money. So
it's a very intricate question with many intricate layers, but let me just explain it. Somewhere we live in a culture across the world which believes that having more means you are better. Okay, which is why when we give a lot of importance to what you're earning as opposed to how meaningful your life is, this becomes a problem. So somewhere as parents, our definition of success also needs to change with the times. If I understand that, see, after COVID, if you notice, the real successful person is the one who's been able to remain peaceful and calm and balanced. Your money has not helped at any point, right? And across the world, people can tell you that mental fitness has been a very important asset right now. So how I define success is a very important thing. So one of the ways in which we can speak to our child is to also help them understand the different definitions of success. Winning need not always be success. Sometimes learning is success, growth is success. So helping children over a period, and that's why I said that follow-up of our discussions are very important. When I help my child understand that making money alone is not enough. Okay. And one of the problems that children will say is, but you came to Oman to make money. Many children will give these arguments because they're teenagers, right? And they will, trigger the parent, push them saying, see, you could have also stayed back in India. Why did you come here? So this is where the parents can also use this as a teachable moment and say, I came here because we had very little. Now that we have more, we can explore more options. now that we have this can be used as a base upon which we can build more for ourselves. So trying to explain these over a period of time and helping children understand that success can have many different levels of understanding will be a good way to start. Of course, it will not happen overnight, and there will still be children who will want to make more money. But we must never underestimate the power of sowing that seed in their mind.
Of course, ma'am. Yes. Now, next question is like the parents can't sit always with the kid, thereby there are chances of misuse of the social media. So, what can a parent do to prevent or monitor this? Like they create fake accounts, they circulate inappropriate contents and all. So, what can a parent do, or how can they control them?
One of the things is the gadget use itself. See, if you know that your child is going online more often, have a laptop, which is the only gadget that they can access. Keep it in a place that a lot of people use, like, keep it at the dining table, things like that. Let them not have time to go away and, sit alone and explore and things like that. Second is to also have a very important discussion with them about cyber safety. One is not to share their passwords with anybody, never to share their location with anybody. Third is to also never take friends online of people they do not know. That's very important, because a lot of predators online will use these children, knowing that parents are always working, both parents are working, things like that. So never share location, never share personal details with people who you don't know. And more important, control the payment gateways, not to leave credit cards, debit cards, just like that for children to use. And it's okay to say no as a parent. Okay, one of the mistakes that parents make is that they think they shouldn't say no to their young child. Please say no. It's okay. You would have done something right. Because somewhere, young children may not know what is right and wrong. And my role as a parent is to set those healthy boundaries and set those rules. So it may be very important to set these rules. And if the child misuses it in spite of that, you could take away the Wi-Fi password. Only you can know it. You will key it into the system, things like that. Because sometimes when they've gone on to pornographic content and all of these things, it may be important for me to make sure that they're using it only for online classes, and the Wi-Fi password is something that I know. And there are also softwares that you can use. Of course, our children are more tech savvy. They may break us, sort of override some things. But at least if you can use a lot of apps to block certain apps that are not good for them and things like that. So there are a lot of these things, and there are a lot of beautiful online tutorials that you can go on to see how to make your system, the laptop that your child is going to use, safe for the child to use. And of course, it may not be 100% protection, but at least we will be able to control as many areas which could lead to our child accessing inappropriate information. So I hope that helps.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. My last question was like, ma'am has already discussed that how to spend the quality time with the parents. Now, again, I don't think that there needs to be, ma'am has said that how to spend time with our children, quality time with our children. So I'm not going for all those questions. So these were the questions that our parents have come to, and we are very thank you for explaining in detail, ma'am. Like I hope that the parents will be very much satisfied with your answers given. Okay, so it was very lively interactions, ma'am. Okay, now let me give the session to our AVP ma'am, Seema ma'am, for vote of thanks.
Good evening to all our resource persons, especially our ma'am, Ms. Aarti C. Rajaratnam, to our dear parents, all our dignitaries, my beloved teachers and friends. First of all, I would like to use this opportunity to wish my fellow teachers working in Indian system and all over the world a happy Teachers' Day. Definitely, the entire teachers fraternity needs a great applause on this day, as they have raised themselves above par and kept their zeal and enthusiasm during this difficult period of COVID-19. Now, moving on to my Thanksgiving session. First of all, I would like to thank wholeheartedly the speaker of the day, Ms. Aarti C. Rajaratnam, who, in spite of her busy schedule, agreed readily to conduct a session for the parents of Indian School Alma Vela. I hope this session proved to be highly helpful for our parents. Madam Aarti, I, on behalf of our school management committee, on behalf of our beloved principal, vice principal, teachers, and parents, I once again thank from the bottom of my heart. Let me thank our dear parents, who are the main stakeholders of our institution, who had always extended support and stood by our side during all the good and bad times. Dear parents, on this Teachers' Day, we teachers of Indian School Almabela are thanking each one of you by organizing this event. I also thank our dear principal, Mr. P. Prabhakaran, who had guided, supported to make this event a successful one. I also thank our beloved Vice Principal Ma'am, Gladys Diana Shivkumar, who is our inspiring force in this endeavor. Now, with all my deepest feelings, I thank the Counseling Department of Middle Section for arranging such a session. Thanking you, Mrs. Mithila, and to all our HODs, coordinators, all my beloved teachers for extending your fullest support. Once again, I thank you all. Wishing you a great evening ahead. Thank you, ma'am, once again.
Thank you, ma'am, for your evidence-based ways of helping children to role model, helping the parents to role model and lead the way. And we thank all the parents for watching. Thank you and good evening.